Live. How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we're back at it with our latest Mets news and rumors segment to get into right here, right now. My apologies for the delay. As always, of course, your guy Wardy is delayed here. I'm going to switch up the graphic in just one moment for each and every one of you, so that way you guys have the up-to-date graphic there and don't have the one from our video earlier today. Just give me 1 second to pull that up for each and every one of you guys. And again, greatly appreciate everyone's patience. Thank you so much for that. Let me get this up here. Bam, bam, and there we go. Alrighty, folks, we got a lot to talk about tonight because since we did our video earlier stating how the Mets are not only in the market for Dylan Cease from the San Diego Padres, but also Michael Canha, check out that video in case you guys haven't already. Since then, more news has come out. The Mets have offered a contract to Mark Canha on a potential reunion. Yeah, you heard that correctly, folks. Mark Canha, Canha Corn, can he come back? Mark Canha, we will deep dive the foodie and his interest in potentially returning to Queens. Why or why not? It makes sense for the Mets here. And according to David Stearns, he likes Canha and he wants him back for a reason. What exactly could those reasons be is what I'm going to highlight for each and every one of you. From there, we will get into more on the pitching front. Per not only Pat Ragazzo, but as well as John Heyman, most recently of the New York Post, did state that the Mets are in active trade negotiation for Dylan Cease, and the Mets may have an advantage over a potential other suitor in the Chicago Cubs. We'll get into what exactly the advantages that the Mets may have versus the Cubs and others. Are the Mets in the market, and to what degree here for Michael Canha, reaffirming from what Pat Ragazzo reported on that we touched on in our video earlier today, along with plenty else news, plenty more, I should say, happening in Mets land. Thank you guys so much for smashing that like and subscribe button as your first chime in. It really does mean a lot. And to all my replay viewers, please let us know in the comments down below, what is your takeaway from tonight's live show, having everything to do with the Mets news and rumors. Mark Canha, Dylan Cease, Michael Canha. We'll talk a bit on the bullpen. We'll talk on the prospects, if we should be hugging them or not. Should they be staying or should they be leaving in a blockbuster trade? We will touch on it all. And yes, we'll get into a little bit on Pete Alonso if there's any other key updates to get into on the Polar Bear front. But let's get a roll call going, everybody. Thank you so much for chiming in. We appreciate you. I got ZS in the chat. We got Jeffy, Julio, Stony, great member, Leo, great member, OC, how you doing? Drew, Ed, Can, Nick, Ethan, great member, great follow here, and Vladdy, thank you so much for the donation. Hey, Wardy, you think we end up with Cease or Canha? I mean, I don't want to get my hopes up, but listen, the Mets are in active trade talks for a reason, right? So they're trying to make something happen. I'm not going to guarantee that's going to happen, so I'll just say this. I think Canha makes more sense between the two based on the current ties the Mets already have to Michael Canha from his time with the Yankees, but based on pure stuff and what guy I think gives you the highest upside, it's Dylan Cease. So either way, I would be happy with either piece, and we're going to further highlight them. Vladdy, thank you so much for the donation. I appreciate you a lot, my man. ZS in the chat. D, if I didn't mention him already. Hey, Jack, great member with a $5 haul, says, let's see here. Let's see. Why do we think this trade has to be an extension-based deal, or I'm not going to be happy about giving up top prospects, like the Tyler Glasnow trade. So, Hey Jack is saying, I'm only in favor of the Mets trading for Dylan Cease or Michael Canha if they have an extension in place not long after acquiring them. I find myself in that category too. Not that I'm opposed to the trade otherwise, but yeah, if you have an extension locked down with either of these starters, it makes it easier to stomach parting ways with top prospect talent, which is exactly what the Mets would inevitably have to do if they acquire Canha or Cease via trade from AJ Preller and the San Diego Padres. Again, guys, thank you so much for chiming in for our latest Mets news and rumors segment. We got John, great member, how you doing? Richard, we got Zan Boogie, how you doing? Darren, great member, Julio, Keith 738, Truman Quinn, going up the list here. Brandon Rosales, great member, how are you? We got our other guys in Paul Revere, how you doing here? Grimace, Thomas, going up the list here. Daniel Caps, great member, JD, Richard, Caesar, how you doing? Sanders, come one, come all. We appreciate you guys. And if I miss anyone's name, please don't take it personal. We're going to have thousands of people that watch us live and then on replay. So naturally, I'm not going to get to everyone's comments right in time, but I'm going to do my absolute best to be here to answer as many as I can while having a free-flowing conversation on all the latest news to get into. Bobby G, great member in here. And I know you guys are wondering, Why are we going to talk about Mark Canha? It's a great question. You guys think I was ready to talk about Mark Canha today? No, of course not. Of course not. We'll get into Mark Canha here shortly, but before we do, let's go across to the yard here. Let's talk about what's happening across Major League Baseball. As many of you guys know, I am a reoccurring host every single week, starting Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, in the Bleacher Report app covering MLB-wide topics. And today, I cover the latest on what's going on with Dylan Cease, Michael Cain, the Luis Robert trade that fell through between the White Sox and the Reds, the latest reliever pickups outside of Ryan Stanek and what we saw in Tommy Kahnle, but also there, and Taylor Rogers, the southpaw, being pried away from his brother Tyler from San Fran, being acquired by the Cincinnati Reds. Also seeing Carlos Estevez no longer throwing meatballs of Francisco Lindor there in the in the NLDS, but rather he'll be serving up some heaters there for the Kansas City Royals on a 2-year contract. We touch on that also. Check me out on the Bleacher Report app, guys. Again, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern there for MLB-wide topics beyond just the Mets. And we also did see a topic that's separate from the Mets, but a slight connection only because the Mets did have a level of interest on a 1-year deal, and that was the reunion of Mad Max Scherzer. But instead, as you guys see down below from John Heyman of the New York Post, Max Scherzer is no more. He is officially signed with the Toronto Blue Jays on a 1-year, $15.5 million deal. This is obviously a bit steeper than what the Mets were willing to cough up for a guy in Max, who we have no clue how many innings he's going to give for you in 2025. The Grizzled veteran, now at the young age of 40, is going to help fortify and solidify that rotation for the Blue Jays and help kick a guy like Yariel Rodriguez out of the rotation on the outside looking in and being a pivotal bullpen piece for them. And we all know that Pete Alonso and Max have a good relationship, so we'll see if that at all plays in hand with Alonso's decision of whether he comes back to the Mets or not. Again, I will be surprised if Alonso's not in a uniform come opening day for this Mets team, and that has really been standing firm, even with all the public negotiation drama going on back and forth, left, right, and center. Hasn't really wavered my thought process and the process of many, which is that Alonso knows his market is limited, and he knows the best destination for him and to potentially get a bag again a year from now. The free agent market is more than likely returning home to Queens and with the Mets. It's as simple as that. But guys, thank you so much. Julio with the $5 holla. I appreciate that. We'll be invited to the wedding, Julio. Hopefully, brother. Hope to see you there. Thank you so much for the donation. If you know, you know, from the amazing day. We appreciate that. Let's see. SMG, let me know. Who do you think blows? Are you talking about Mark Canha in particular? Are you talking about a different player? Are you talking about me? Let me know in the chat. We'd love to hear it. Here to talk about Canha. I just don't know where this came from. This did, in fact, come from John Heyman. For those that are unaware, let me fill you in on where this news initially stems from, everybody. Because John Heyman, who obviously does coverage for Bleacher Report app a couple days throughout the week, as do I, but also is writing through the New York Post and MLB Network. He did come out with a piece through the New York Post just a little bit earlier that I would like to share with each and every one of you, and it was on the following. Mets in talks with Padres about Dylan Cease. Initially posted, and then he's posted on his X account since then. And then this piece, there's a lot of goodies to get into, folks, and we will talk about the Dylan Cease aspect here shortly, but I wanted to highlight the Mark Canha aspect of this because that is the most important one of all. But before we deep dive a bit on Mark Canha here and why the Mets are at all in a market for a guy like him out of all players, let's first highlight a little bit more on the Toronto Blue Jays aspect of things, because what Pat Ragazzo, who's been a great friend on the platform and doing a tremendous job on the beat for the Mets through an affiliate with Sports Illustrated, has noted as of today is that the Blue Jays are on the hunt for still an Alonso or Bregman to pair with Scherzer. Now, Max signing with Toronto is clearly showing that even if they don't land either player, he's signing up to be a Blue Jay for all of 2025, at least up until the trade deadline, where it wouldn't surprise me if we hear similar drama if their Blue Jays are on the outside looking in. He's like, I want to be dealt, even though he missed maybe half of that first half of the season with injury or something inevitably. But Max is going to a team that he's hoping to push for playoffs with in 2025. If you acquire Alonso or Bregman, that certainly increases your chances to get there at what is a very deep AL East, but an otherwise weak American League for the Toronto Blue Jays. We'll find out what happens between Alonso and Bregman. They're still actively involved in the Bregman front, as is the case with the Cubs, the Tigers to a degree, and the Houston Astros, are with the Red Sox on the outside looking in. Pete Alonso negotiations still favor the Mets, barring changes, as they pretty much have since the absolute start of this entire thing. So we're going to further break down the latest here on Alonso and Bregman as more news rolls out for us. But folks, now let's talk about the Mark Canha aspect of things, which I find very interesting, because in this article from John Heyman that I implore you guys to check out in case you guys haven't already, from the New York Post, and this goes in here with my post that you guys can see here, per John Heyman, the Mets offered Pete Alonso, Mark Canha a non-guaranteed contract for 2025. And this is an interesting one, everybody, because the initial reaction is, why in God's name would the Mets consider a Mark Canha reunion, right? For those that don't remember, Mark Canha, who had a nice stint with the Mets, that's why you see his Mets stats down below there, with 19 home runs and 90 RBIs, 10 stolen bags, a 259, 359, 395 clip for 14% better than the average batter in baseball for Mark Canha. He was tremendous in a platoon role for the Mets in the corner outfield and at times at DH in 2022 when the Mets won over 100 games. Absolutely raked against the Philadelphia Phillies, where he had not one but 2 home runs against them in that rain delay day game, which I remember running home to cover like it was yesterday. Mark Canha, just a flair for the dramatic, an absolute vibes guy, similar to Jose Iglesias and Jesse Winker in the sense that you absolutely love these kind of personalities in your clubhouse, even without contrasting a guy like Canha is to a degree from a guy like Winker. Winker's a bit more outspoken, Canha's more soft-spoken, as a big foodie, which is why he loves New York. He loves traveling and trying all different types of food. He even started a YouTube channel not long before he got traded by the Mets, and then he was traded after what was an underwhelming 2023 first half. Same thing with everyone else in this Mets lineup, not named Tommy Pham, and he was traded there for a lesser pitching piece that the Mets acquired from the Brewers, and this was right before the Mets officially brought David Stearns in as their Pobo. Since then, David Stearns has shown a level of interest in Mark Canha, and the entire reason as to why the Mets would consider someone like him is the following. One, Mark Canha would be in a platoon situation, everybody. You can never have enough depth. For Mark Canha to be a guy that you can have off the bench and utilize in the infield and outfield is nothing to scoff at, and while the Mets are not in current negotiation with Jose Iglesias, it does not mean it can't happen in the near future closer to spring training, which I fully expected to be the case. Canha is interesting because not only does he give you fit in both the corner outfields and DH, even though the power is suspect, you're not getting a whole lot from him over the past couple of years, and we know that. Canha's a contact and gap-to-gap guy through and through, but what he also is a guy that can give you first base reps. And I know Mets fans don't want to hear this, but David Stearns would like as much certainty as possible. Mark Canha played approximately 50 games at first base last season, splitting time with the Detroit Tigers and the San Francisco Giants. That versatility alone is an intrigue for David Stearns, who wants guys that have not only veteran experience, but again, a backup option at first base versus what we currently have, because right now we got nothing. Mark Vientos, who's a complete uncertainty at the position, over what is a guy Mark Canha who can at least play the position fine without really being much of a liability there. That's what Canha can provide for you. What he can also provide in a platoon situation, batting facing mainly lefties off the bench and maybe getting some reps at DH or those other positions that we alluded to, is that he's coming off of a 2024 campaign with an over 275 average, over 380 on base percentage, and a just under 800 OPS there for a 20% above league average batter when facing left-handed pitching. So how would Mark Canha fit mostly for this Mets team outside of really in a limited role off the bench there, kind of like Jesse Winker based on DH platoon situations? Well, Mark Canha also does make sense if the Mets still have a taste or an idea for trading away Starling Marte. I know this is not necessarily something that Mets fans love to hear, which is the idea of trading away Marte to have Canha replace him, but you have to understand the greater context behind it. The Mets don't have a dire need to trade Marte right now, but if they're going to trade Marte either for another bullpen piece or to get rid of his contract and allocate more money to then allocate it elsewhere for the roster for a more position of need, whether that is Alonso to a degree or just for the sake of maybe going after someone else via trade that we haven't talked about, that at least gives him more comfortability to do so by bringing in Canha and makes Marte less of a certainty versus what he currently is as that platoon role with Jesse Winker. We wouldn't be saying this right now if the Mets acquired someone else for DH of more significance like an Anthony Santander or a Teoscar Hernandez, and the reason exactly why they like Canha is because in that limited role, he is well above league average there, just not a guy that you want everyday reps in the outfield or certainly getting at bats, but in a platoon role back in Queens, the vibes are immaculate. He loved his time with the Mets, he loved it in Queens, and I think he'd bode really well in this current Mets clubhouse with all the personalities that they have, good, bad, and different. They got a lot of great ones there. Canha is just added to the list, and Mark Canha absolutely feels like the type of guy that'll come in for a pinch hit home run there late in the game to really get the boys going, maybe out of a little bit of rut, among other things. Am I absolutely saying the Mets need to sign Mark Canha? No, but if you're offering him a non-guaranteed contract, how are you at fault if you're the Mets here? Again, it's a non-guaranteed contract. It's a spring training invite, guys. This is no different than the Mets giving like the minor league deal they gave Jose Iglesias a year ago. The difference is that Mark Canha is just a year and a half removed from the last time he was a Met. He didn't look great in the first half of 2023 in more utilized situations than he should have been, but in a limited role, we all know that Mark Canha is absolutely proficient when called upon. We all know off the bench, Mark Canha has been fantastic on grinding out at-bats and also leaning into pitches. The guy's a ball magnet. The Mets will go back to being the highest hit team in Major League Baseball if Canha's on this roster. That's a simple fact. I'm only half joking as I say that. Canha brings plenty upside for you, but what he doesn't bring for you is power. And that's the main thing with Mark Canha. But here's the thing. If you're going to just utilize him in limited platoon situations, guys, this is the Mark Canha that's a year and a half removed from doing all the stuff like this that you guys see beside me right now. Again, he was our home run king at times. He was our clutch hitting king. He made no sense how well he was able to step up, but knowing how deep of a lineup he was with the Mets in 2022, with a healthy Starling Marte up until Mitch Keller ruined that in September of that same year, and all the other heroics that we saw Canha have from start to finish, as we got into not only the month of May, but June, deeper into summer, we really saw Mark Canha blossom. And hilarious how we just saw, what did I just see? Juan Soto diving out to rob Mark Canha there of a single, and now they could be teammates here in 2025. I'm not rolling just the Canha highlights from last season with the Giants in Detroit, which I can in a second, but I just want to go back down memory lane and remind you guys as to what Mark Canha was for this Mets team and how he would be in a more limited situation than what he was with them a couple years ago. That's exactly why they're not even giving him a guaranteed contract. What this comes down to is twofold. One, Mark Canha's interest in coming back to town in a non-guaranteed situation where he knows that, again, he will have to prove himself and play himself into whatever role he would find himself being with the Mets. He also knows that this is really in hand with the rekindling of the relationship. The Mets know that Canha certainly enjoyed his time with the Mets, and he knows that they have a slate, and as long as he doesn't feel like he can absolutely get a much greater role elsewhere, I think a reunion to Queens, again, in a limited role makes sense. But here's the thing. The roster's already full. So Mark Canha, when you already have Tyrone Taylor, when you already have Jose Siri, when you already have Brandon Nimmo, when you already have Juan Soto, when you already have Jesse Winker, when you already have Starling Marte, that's a boatload of outfield up until JD Martinez entered spring training halfway through there or so. Again, plans change, but for right now, the Mets are trying to operate with what they know is a certainty, and Mark Canha has a certainty of a guy that can back up at first base, that can give you platoon options in the corner outfield, and can certainly hit well against left-handed pitching. So that pretty much is my little Mark Canha TED Talk for each and every one of you to enlighten everybody on the pros and what are the obvious cons. Is even on a non-guaranteed contract, do you want to give a roster spot to Mark Canha versus other guys, whether they're in-house or, someone externally? I can understand making that argument for saying, hey, I would like to prefer at least consider our in-house options. And I also understand the opposite, saying, hey, I like certainties, I like veterans, and I like the idea of Mark Canha back in a platoon role. If the Mets have an OMG type vibe again in 2025, just imagine how much Mark Canha would have fun being a part of that clubhouse and really feeding off of that energy. We've seen Canha feed off of the Mets fans, this Michael Wacha before he got good again, and Rick Porcello as to why they were tremendous offseason moves for the Mets. Quite the contrary from what we have to deal with now under Steve Cohen. Darren, great member of a month. Let's go Mets. Health and happiness to you and the fam. Same to you, brother. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Let's see. I can't believe you're pumping Canha up. He sucks. Here's the thing. If you think I'm pumping Canha up, then you're not paying attention to the facts. Nothing that I told each and every one of you is not factual to why the Mets are pursuing Mark Canha. The fan point of view is Mark Canha sucks, but at the same time, the Mets point of view, the team that is actually making the decisions, and David Stearns don't think he sucks, and they offered him a non-guaranteed contract because of everything that I just told you. You can choose not to accept it, you can choose not to like it, but that's the reality of the situation, everybody. So this is not about me trying to gas something up, something greater than what it is. It's a reality of why they have an interest, what his role would be, and ultimately the impact that it may have on other players should they acquire him. Mark Canha makes more sense if you trade away Starling Marte than it currently does with how the team is constructed. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out, but you have to ask some of the rocket scientist Mets fans how they feel, because they may honestly have an opinion that's similar or different from yours. But let's get in here, everybody. So, I do not have a Canha jersey, no. Even though I liked Canha's time a lot with the Mets in 2022 and 2023, I was quickly over him in the sense that I knew that things weren't going to change. Let's see here. Mark Canha is 35, and I don't get it, all for the same reason I just alluded to. Not for an everyday player in a limited role. That's exactly what it would be. Let's see. I'm not saying I don't know what sources this came from. I know his name. I'm saying I don't know where the idea of bringing Canha back came from now. Canha, how does this name pop up now? What I just alluded to, Jason. So I hope that I answered all your questions and then some for you guys there. And once more, guys, and this will be my final remarks on Mark Canha now. And you guys can spam in the chat from everything that I just relayed. If you're for or against a Mark Canha reunion, I'd love to hear it. But my final remarks and my closing remarks on Canha are the following. Do I want Mark Canha? I'm fine with him on a non-guaranteed contract. It's hard to be opposed to pretty much spring training invites to see the upside that they have when, again, there's nothing wrong with it. There's zero risk. God forbid the Mets had more veteran experience there that maybe even started the year in AAA for them, like Jose Iglesias, to then see the impact that they had once called upon because of inevitable injuries or because of guys not playing up to caliber. These things happen every single year. Stop getting our you-know-what's in the twist by a reality that the Mets are just trying to make sure that they're as deep as possible for 2025, but it would make a level of sense more if Marte finds himself on the outside looking in if he gets traded for maybe something greater there, and then Canha's kind of a placeholder in the meantime or something else that we haven't talked about as of now. But I want to know how you guys feel on the Canha front. I appreciate that. No, I'm not losing sleep over it if Canha goes elsewhere. Far from it. I think the fact that this was leaked, that the Mets have this contract offer out there, is kind of telling for Canha, you know, that, okay, take it or leave it pretty much. We'd love you back there. We'd love to bring you back as a guy who thrived here a couple years ago, but we're not going to be doing anything crazy for you. We're not even going to give you a guaranteed deal because we just can't commit that to you. If you want an opportunity to push for a roster spot this spring training here, Mark, we will at least give you that at minimum. And I think that's fair to him, and that's what I'll leave you with, guys, on the Mark Canha front. You guys can continue to spam it, your positivity, negativity, whatever the nonsense is going to be in the chat, and I appreciate it. Let's see. As we expected over this past week, has now officially been DFA'd by the Dodgers and their bullpen. Reason being, after acquiring Kirby Yates and showing interest in other players, they need to make roster room. So even with Ryan Brazier posting a very solid and respectable 2024 campaign, just don't tell that to the Mets there in the playoffs, because he was batting practice there as he was kind of that leadoff pitcher for us, right, in the a spot starter, if you will, at some of those playoff games when they had their bullpen starts. Brazier, though, who had a lot of success with the Dodgers past couple years, not so much in Fenway Park and the Red Sox prior there, is now a veteran reliever available in the free agent market, as the Dodgers are trying to get rid of that entire contract. If not, if he clears, then he'll be optioned there to AAA for LA. But I just want to remind you guys of that, because Brazier is now one of the better relievers available in the free agent market now that he is officially out there, but he will come with a cost, which is whatever the current price point is there of what Ryan Brazier's contract is with the LA Dodgers, which I'm actually going to check on real quick for you guys. Okay, so it appears that Brazier still has, yeah, okay, so Brazier's owed $4.5 million this year and $4.5, actually, no, I think there's this year. He's a UFA in 2026. Okay, so Ryan Brazier, actually, that's the same exact dollar amount that Ryan Stanek just got to return to the Mets, $4.5 million, and similar production as well, and what you'd be getting someone like Ryan Brazier. So again, I don't expect the Mets to go there, because they pretty much just did that there for Ryan Stanek, which I love the flame-throwing Stanek. I think there's a lot of upside for him in this bullpen, but beyond that, though, Ryan Brazier is now an arm available in that free agent market for other teams that are looking to nip at the heels on that front. What happened to getting Tim Hill? I'm still in favor of it. We have yet to find out if the Mets are still in favor of it, because reporting outside of Pat Ragazzo suggests that the Mets are pretty much done for their bullpen. I think Tim Hill, a lefty specialist, a crafty southpaw, a side-arming southpaw, makes so much sense to rekindle that relationship with Desi Drewskull. And now let's go from talking about Mark Canha, because that was a fun discussion. Now let's get into the trade talks, because this is what's going to take up the remainder of our discussion, more than likely, certainly the bulk of it, because this is a very important one. If you guys haven't already, to our over 700 concurrent viewers, guys, help us get to 400 plus likes at the end of the live show. It'd be greatly appreciated. Or so on me wanting to give back to you guys more than I really have, especially I've done a lot of giveaways in years past, but I really want to make sure where you guys know for certain after every new 1,000 subscribers that there will be a giveaway, versus things kind of being sporadic at times depending on how good or bad the Mets season is. It usually goes in hand with my giveaways and how much or how little I do of them. Vincent, thank you so much for the $5.50 donation. Wardy makes me feel old referencing Waka, because I recall when they traded for Matt Lawton saying he's the best leadoff guy. Basically, yeah, exactly. And again, I mention Walker, that's before he got good again, right? That's when the Mets lab wasn't a lab. It was shit, and we couldn't figure him out in 2019 or so. Thank you so much for the donation, my friend. Yoshima, thank you so much for the donation. Says, I will scream if we get Elbow Cease. I will be very, very happy if we get Dylan Cease. Seriously, even with the injury concerns that he's had in the past, Dylan Cease is an absolute dog that we're going to get into. Great Photoshop on Mark Canha. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Canha Corn over here. Drew with the $5 hollow. We appreciate that, Drew. Thank you kindly. But all right, guys, now let's get into not talking just on Mark Canha, but let's get into the other keynotes from the reporting from Jon Heyman today. And it's going to further highlight here Dylan Cease, everybody. Dylan Cease, who we first touched on in yesterday's video. Check that in case you guys haven't already. As John initially alluded to the connection with Cease there first before it's been further broken down by Pat Ragazzo and now John himself. But Dylan Cease is a dog, guys. We'll talk more on Michael Cain here after Cease, but we're going to have a further emphasis on Cease because at least according to Jon Heyman's reports, the Mets are currently in trade talks for Dylan Cease. And I would also like to update these stats briefly, so give me 1 second here, just because I do believe I fixed the graphic where it doesn't say Mets stats, it should just say career stats for him. But give me 1 second to do that. Okay, there we go. Graphic is fixed, everybody. So Dylan Cease is a workhorse. We know this. And he's been in trade talks pretty much since the start of the offseason. Something that I found really interesting from the latest breakdown from Jon Heyman's article that I implore you guys to check out is that not only are the Mets in active trade talks for Dylan Cease, they're presumably involved in Michael Cain as well, which Pat Ragazzo not only reaffirmed in our content from earlier today, but also stated how not only are the Mets in on Michael Cain, but they're more in on Michael Cain than they are Dylan Cease. So this is kind of one of those things where we'll have to wait and see as to who's more accurate between the two. Not so much accurate, but to really just find out, okay, like what is legitimate behind this reporting here? Because are the Mets really more involved with Cease? Are they more involved with Cain? They're clearly involved in both markets, which is exciting. Sean, thank you so much for the donation. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you so much. And again, I see the upsides with both too. Fred Perez, great member. Thank you so much for the $2 holla. Really does mean a lot. I appreciate that too. But let's get into, okay, if the Padres are going to be trading away someone like Dylan Cease. Actually, give me 1 second, everybody. I'm trying to get this thing fixed up right now, but we're having a little bit of an issue with the graphic. I think it's just more so because I got so many things running right now. So apologies if the Dylan Cease highlights don't run exactly how I want them to, but we'll do the best we got. All right, guys, it might be on and off regardless. The big thing about San Diego is that even with them looking to shed payroll a bit because of these contracts, that being Dylan Cease and Michael Cain, there's actually a bit more of an emphasis to trade these guys because of their peak trade value as rentals that they know they're likely not going to sign to long-term deals, and also knowing that if they do trade Cease or Cain, and drumroll please, this is the most important aspect of this, everybody, is that they will then pursue Flaherty or Pivetta, guys. The Padres are not trying to trade either starter to really hinder their ability to have a playoff run in 2025, and that's reaffirmed here by Jon Heyman. So what this means is that there's actually solid reality that one of these starters at minimum is going to get traded by AJ Preller and the Padres. They're trying to maximize their trade value. They know the rentals and guys that they're not going to bring back, and they could trade away either, if not both these guys, for players that can help this team as of now. That's something the Padres have an interest in after really depleting their farm for Juan Soto, among other players in recent years. They're trying to boost that back while still having their on-field ready talent to make them push for playoffs in 2025 and have another deep run there with Mike Shell to really impress them a lot as their first-year manager. But Cease, Bulldog, numbers down below. 1 year left there at roughly $14 million, 3.5 ERA there. We're looking at a 10.6 K per nine and a 3.1 walks per nine. Three consecutive seasons with at least 200 strikeouts or so. Again, 3 consecutive seasons with at least 170 plus innings. Dylan Cease has absolutely nails. He's got a 6-pitch mix. The fastball is lively and the curveball is absolutely disgusting. The slider gets so much bite as well. Dylan Cease would be a true weapon, an ace caliber starter in this Mets rotation rotation right away. And as John Heyman noted in his piece today, the Mets do have a slight advantage over the Chicago Cubs and their stubbornness to part ways with prospect talent. Not only their stubbornness to part ways with prospect talent, but what their prospect talent actually consists of. Per reports, AJ Preller and the Padres appear to have a little bit more of an interest in the Mets and what they could offer, which is highlighted by and headlined by the following players: Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, and Brandon Sproat. I understand Mets fans. You don't want any of these kids traded, nor do I, especially Brandon Sproat. That would crush me if we traded him for 1 year of a pitcher, and then Sproat becomes like an ace-caliber pitcher for the Padres for years to come, and then Cease or Kane walked after this 2025 season. But there's a couple things the Mets can do. One, they can make sure that they do the best of their abilities to extend one of these pitchers, right? Whoever that they would acquire, whether it's Kane, whether that's Cease. They have to do one of those things. Secondly, we know that while the Mets have plenty of talent in their farm, they have to make sure that they have to give to get. And AJ Preller is not going to go out of his way to trade to a potential rival, essentially, in the National League, both having the common ground of wanting to push for a playoff spot in the National League in 2025, fully expecting to do so. The last thing Preller wants is to trade Cease or Kane to a team like the Mets, a team like the Braves, in which they have interest in both players too. So further reason as to why the Mets need to make sure they get the job done here for one of these guys at minimum is that by acquiring a player to ultimately help the Mets or the Braves push for playoffs, they need to make sure that they replace them with Flaherty or Pivetta at minimum, right? And they also need to make sure that they get guys that help them right now. That's why Acuna, Williams, and Sproat, all guys are expected to hit the major league level as soon as this season, are more appealing for a team like the Padres versus what the Cubs can currently offer. That's why in particular, Acuna, Williams, and I would throw Ronnie Mauricio in that mix too, are all guys that make sense that we could find ourselves parted with. Not all of them, but at least one, if not two. And at the end of the day, can I handle the Mets trading away some of their top prospects if it means that they bring in Cease or Kane and they sign beyond the 2025 season? Absolutely. And this is nothing personal against the kids, but I want this rotation to be as deep as possible for 2025. If you land Dylan Cease, your rotation consists of Sean Manaea, Dylan Cease, Kodai Senga as your 1, 2, 3 is nothing to scoff at. That's among the best in baseball when healthy and when right. Then you have David Pearson, Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes, Griffin Canning, Paul Blackburn, Tyler McGill. You have quality depth there. If you acquire Michael Kane, the same applies. Another ace caliber starter with upside that we'll get into shortly, folks. But that's the latest there on what the Mets' interest is and their current trade talks for Dylan Cease. But the fact that their farm appears to be at least a bit more appealing than the Cubs and more satisfactory for a team like the Padres and AJ Preller really has me intrigued to see how this is going to play out, right? You know, Pat Regazzo not so much suggested it, but at least noted it yesterday, how while there has been talks between the Mets and the Padres, specifically on the Kane front, of a top 10 to 15 prospect being parted with in the deal, and maybe Marte, that Pat, he himself may note of, is a guy that's been in trade talks a lot this offseason, could he be parted with if he's paid down completely? So Marte to the Padres doesn't make a lot of sense to me unless it's the following. The Mets still give up quality prospects. They trade Marte, eat the majority of his contract, and Marte has a platoon role with the Padres, kind of filling in the shoes for Jurickson Profar there. But it really only makes sense for the Mets, in my opinion, to do that, is if that was really a sweetener to make sure that they do acquire Cease or Kane, which I can live with because Marte has a limited role in 2025 as is, would further validate why they have a non-guaranteed contract offer out there for Mark Canha, so at least they can fill the void a bit there. Yes, they might lose a little bit more in comparing Marte to Canha overall, but in limited platoons, it isn't that much different, if at all. And also, you're adding Dylan Cease or Michael Kane, so you're really going to be fine with it at the end of the day if you're David Stearns and Steve Cohen. So I would love Kane. I would love Cease. Cease, I've had more of a personal connection to, just going back to his time with the White Sox. I've seen this guy dominate for years. His 2022 breakout really stood out to me. I would love him this Mets rotation, and he's a guy that I fear will be an Atlanta Brave if he doesn't go to the Mets. So more reason as to why I want to see it happen. Michael Kane, I think, makes a lot of sense, and it was interesting. Zach Scott, former Mets GM, tweeted earlier how Cease makes more sense for the Mets than Kane based on him having better stuff, meaning greater ace potential. And while I understand the greater ace potential, I disagree on any other front of why Cease is more attractive for the Mets than Kane, because I think at just as much as you can make an argument for Cease is what you can do here, if not more so, with Michael Kane. And it's because of the following reasons, everybody. One, Michael Kane has a lot of longevity, right? This was the first season of his career that he pitched 170 innings. Prior to that, it was just 100-plus innings as a starter and a reliever in 2023 with the New York Yankees there. What is notable is the New York Yankees connection. I cannot emphasize this enough, and I'm curious if Zach, just forgot about this, didn't really think about this right away, but it's true. Having Desi Druskull, who was working with Michael Kane a couple years ago in the Yankees organization, in their pitching lab there as their assistant pitching coach, now the Mets assistant pitching coach, is notable. Having Clay Holmes, who was friends and in that bullpen with Michael Kane, who can learn from Michael Kane being stretched as a starter, as Holmes is now being a starter, being stretched as one himself, makes a lot of sense. Rekindling that relationship with Carlos Mendoza. Let's not forget, Mendy was the bench boss for the Yankees in 2023. So he has a lot of great familiarity with Michael Kane as well. So needless to say, Michael Kane makes a lot of sense for this Mets team. He may also cost you a little bit less in comparison to Cease because they're both rentals, but Cease is more of a surefire guaranteed thing. You know what Cease is at his floor versus at his ceiling, whereas Kane, we've seen him dominate right now. He's peaking at his ceiling, and his projections look great for next season, but Kane still needs to prove it. Michael Kane has not given us back-to-back seasons at a starter workload yet in his major league career. So that is the uncertainty that the Mets would be buying in on should they acquire someone like him. Now, the downside of someone like Michael Kane is what I just alluded to. There is not a certainty as to what you're getting. He looked great. He had Cy Young caliber stuff that we saw this past season, but still, it's just pretty much a 1.5-year sample size. You want to see more there, especially if you're going to invest some top prospects to make it happen. But guys, are there upside and is there positivity into acquiring Michael Kane or Dylan Cease? Yes, and I think we would be damn grateful and fortunate if we acquire either of the two this offseason. Now, guys, to expand further here on Michael Kane for you guys, let's take a look at the Baseball Savant numbers, and we'll compare and contrast them there with Dylan Cease. As you guys can see here, pull them up, his 2024 percentiles are as follows. 87th percentile in pitching run value, 68th in fastball run value, 32nd in breaking run value, 99th that we see here in off-speed run value, 68th in expected ERA, 67th in expected batting average, 36th in fastball velocity, so something that is different between himself there and a guy like Dylan Cease. Cease has absolute gas that he's chucking there. Even though the fastball life isn't as strong as it was a couple years ago, and the quality of the pitch, it's still true that his fastball velocity sits 97 to 100, whereas Michael Kane is more, again, low to mid-90s that you're getting on his fastball, but it's a sinker, and that sinker has been unhittable. It's been absolutely deadly. 99th percentile in average exit velocity, guys. No one is hitting Michael Kane hard to save their life. Nobody. He's the best in the game. 70th percentile in chase percentage, 78th in whip percentage, 81st in K percentage, 39th in walk percentage, but that's okay because the K to walk ratio is still great. 79th percentile in barrel percentage, 97th in hard hit percentage, again, among the league best, 46th in ground ball percentage, so just below league average in ground ball percentage, so that's fine. But Michael Kane's a dog, and his projections for 2025 per Fangraphs are 180 innings or more, and right around a 3.5 to 3.6 ERA. And the Mets get that. And year one with Michael Kane, chef's kiss. And the Mets get Dylan Cease at all similar to what he did last year. Chef's kiss. Especially when you look at Cease's numbers. Again, Kane, for those that are unaware, has the sinker, the changeup, the four seam, the sweeper, and the slider. How this compares to Dylan Cease, guys, as we take a look at Cease's Savant numbers. Again, they're a little bit different here on what Michael Kane dominates in versus maybe where someone like Cease lacks, and where he's more proficient at is different than Kane as well. 75th percentile in pitching run value. Fastball run value, 26th. Quite the stark contrast from 2 years ago in 2022, where he was in the 81st percentile in fastball run value and 99th in pitching run value. Now he's 75th, but he's in the 99th percentile in breaking run value, which is Dylan Cease. He's also in the 36th percentile in off-speed run value, 79th in expected ERA, 85th in expected batting average, 90th in fastball velocity, just below league average in average exit velocity. And that's significant, though, because Cease does get barreled fairly hard versus someone like Kane, who gives up no hard contact whatsoever. 70th percentile in chase percentage, 92nd in whip percentage, 89th in K percentage. Then he's just below league average in walk percentage at 41st percentile, barrel percentage in the bottom quarter in the 32nd percentile, 51st percentile in hard hit percentage, so right around league average, but still night and day difference from Kane, who's so much better. Ground ball percentage, similar to Kane, 39th percentile. Extension a little bit low too. With the four-seam slider, curve, sweeper, change, cutter, mix, I'm seeing those S's, the sliders, the sweepers. That's what I love there, especially that sweeper, which can be nasty. The curveball, which has so much break. That four-seam fastball, which again might be a little flat at times for Cease, but really picks it up with the velocity, sitting 97 to 100. I love either option for the Mets here. Goes without saying. Dylan Cease, Michael Kane. So now to all my live viewers and to my replay viewers, please let me know in the comments down below to my replay viewers, to my live viewers watching right here, right now. Please spam it in the chat, folks. Between Michael Kane and Dylan Cease, which one makes more sense to you and why? I'd love to hear. And there is a great point. Dylan Cease is a Boris guy, I believe, so there's a very little chance of an extension happening. If Michael Kane is not a Boris client, that could be a deciding factor on which one makes more sense to acquire now to try to get extension talks going. Because again, if you're going to give up the Drew Gilberts, the Brandon Sproats, the Acuñas of the world, the Williams, the what have yous, you need to make sure that you have these guys locked down beyond one season. Otherwise, it's really hard to stomach should either of those guys blossom in San Diego or wherever else that they'd find themselves traded to. So between Michael Kane and Dylan Cease, let me know in the chat, guys, in the comments down below which one you guys prefer. And right away, I'm seeing actually a very overwhelming amount of fans in favor of Michael Kane, which further reaffirms exactly what I've been preaching. I'm glad you guys are listening to me. Again, there are reasons that go beyond just the talent alone why Michael Kane probably makes more sense between the two, but it's interesting that Dylan Cease might be a greater reality for the Mets between himself and Kane, should the reporting that John Heyman said earlier at all be true, and how they have a slight advantage over a team like the Chicago Cubs. It's a fascinating one to follow. It's certainly that, and I'm damn excited, I'm damn interested in either, and this, again, further shoots down all the schmucks that were saying, oh, the Mets aren't shopping for a starter, oh, it isn't going to happen. This is why I've been telling you guys for weeks. I still expect it, right? Let's not forget last offseason was similar to this, where up until the very end, we saw David Stearns in trade talks for starters and it materialized with some guys because the asking prices were just too high. But maybe things will start to change now, folks, because listen, if it's not Jack Flaherty, if it's not Nick Pivetta, who the Mets do like quite a bit, that Pat Regazza reaffirmed today in his latest article, that's something to make note of, which tells you the Mets are still in the Nick Pivetta market, but makes more sense to sign him if Alonso walked, because then the qualifying offers pretty much, you know, they're null and void. Then you don't have to give up a draft pick for Pivetta because it would be the pick that you got and Alonso walking to say Tassau in Toronto, San Fran, LA with the Angels, what have you, wherever. But I think Alonso's returning, so Pivetta, I'd have to see to believe it and it happening. But on the pitching end, Jeff Passan, shortly after the new year, reported that the Mets were still shopping for a starter, and it was outside of Hiroki Sasaki. Everyone else has tried to refute it, even including friends that I have in the community. I'm not going to say names, but fellow reporters as well who have not been hearing. Up until now, the Mets have been involved in the starter market. They've always been involved in the starter market. They've always been opportunistic. They've always been there. They've never stopped looking, and they never stop looking. But the difference is now is that it's becoming the public eye that they're in active trade negotiation for elite caliber starters. And the Mets make this happen, that is the exact kind of move that you make as a proper response to the Dodgers is getting better and better. Listen, we know we can't have the roster that the Dodgers have, but by God, if we can make it better than what it currently is, let's go out and try to do exactly that. If you land Dylan Cease, if you land Michael Kane, it makes your rotation amongst the best in all the National League right there. It makes having Clay Holmes as a 5 or 6 starter a lot more easy to digest, and should he blossom, then it looks that much more brilliant for the Mets pitching lab and Desi Driscoll, Jeremy Hefner, then obviously top down from David Stearns, Carlos Mendoza, etc. There are ways to be very happy about this Mets team heading into 2025. Right now, we're happy about Juan Soto big time and the other moves, but we want Pete back. We want another starter. We wouldn't mind another reliever. And we know the Mets are still in the market for a utility man, whether that's Canha on a non-guaranteed contract, whether that's Jose Iglesias, which they really haven't circled back too much to at this point in time, reportedly through the bigger reports. Through lesser reporting, we heard that the Mets were talking to Iglesias a couple months ago, but I think that was more fluff than anything, just because these kind of moves don't happen until right around spring training. That's typically the case for utility guys. Carlos with the $2 holla says, Caden Cease plus Alonso, A plus off. Yes. Yes. If the Mets bring back Alonso and acquire one of Cease or Caden, even if they give up the farm, it's an A plus offseason. Not only did you make your rotation sturdier with much higher upside in 2025 than what you had in 2024, and they carried you far in 2024 still. Your bullpen's bolstered in a better position currently than it was last year, even if you don't land Tim Hill. I just hope that you do still. If you bring back Alonso to pair with Soto, yeah, I'm loving how this offseason looked. That's all you, literally, if that happens, that's as slam dunk of an offseason that a fan could probably ask for in Metsland. Seriously, you're being greedy if you ask for anything else. We're kind of being greedy as is, asking for anything beyond Juan Soto. In contrast to how the Wilpons ran, we're being so damn greedy in comparison. Seriously, so damn greedy. But the stakes are different now. The expectations are different. We, of course, have a taste of this greediness because we know we're expecting to have a deep playoff run. We're expecting to be there close to the dance, if not in the dance in the World Series as soon as this year. The expectations with the Wilpons were simply to make playoffs and hope to make playoffs, and that be that. So while I understand the debates on like Wilpons, Cohen, and stuff like that, you also have to understand the expectations that come along with it. The Wilpons put us under a bad expectation each year because of how much they sucked. Cohen now has us in a great expectation because he's going out and landing guys like Juan Soto. That's why. We're so grateful. We are so spoiled, guys, in such a short period of time. Let us not forget how far we have come over the past 4.5 years. Seriously. You want to give the Padres trash for... I would love to give the Padres trash for Kane, but I know they're going to want top prospects for Kane. I understand that. Oh, one final note before we kind of get close to wrapping up the show, because we are going to be wrapping up shortly, folks. We're not going to be too long-winded today with our live stream. We already had content that came out earlier on Michael Caine, so check that out in case you guys haven't already. And thank you so much for doing exactly that. Really appreciate everyone smashing that like and subscribe button as we break down the latest Mets land. But as you guys can see from Will Salmon of The Athletic, he did note that with the Mets acquiring Ryan Stanek officially today at $4.5 million, they have designated Dylan Covey for assignment. For those that don't remember, Dylan Covey was pretty much like the first move that Steve Cohen and David Stearns made this past offseason. Covey can be utilized as a starter and reliever, has some major velocity behind him, was dominating that we saw in the minor leagues this past year, if I'm not mistaken, in the Phillies organization still at AAA with the Iron Pigs. Covey has plenty upside, and he's on a split contract. So I don't think much changes with him being DFA'd here. We'll see if he goes elsewhere, but he's a guy that very well could start spring training still, expecting to begin the year in AAA with the Mets, and could still impact them at some point in the year when they call upon guys in the bullpen. Covey's a guy that still has upside. I will not be surprised if he stays in the organization one way or the other, because it's a split contract, which means I'm pretty sure that he's guaranteed to still make at least, I think, what, $360K at AAA, which is honestly a lot more than just making, I mean, there are some guys that'll only make a guaranteed rate as low as like 30 to 40K. So it can really range. So I think for Covey, we'll find out what happens with him and his status, but he has been officially DFA'd to make roster room for Ryan Stanek. What this means is when the Mets bring back Alonso and they bring in another pitcher and any other moves they do, a utility guy, what have you, they will have to make more roster room. So if they don't trade guys on the 40-man, they're going to have to DFA guys. That'll be the other thing that they inevitably do. So don't be surprised if you see some spring training invites parted with a little too soon, should they not want to stay in-house in the organization, because we have to make roster room. Let's see. Alexis Rodriguez with a $2 holla. Would Padres include Cronenworth? I'd hope not, considering I don't want his ass. Why in God's name would the Mets want Jake Cronenworth other than him to be our stopgap first base option with a horrendous contract? No, Jake Cronenworth is like, him and Jeff McNeil are best friends in the sense that they profile similar and are equally, not useless, but there's less and less of a need for guys like how Jake Cronenworth profiles as a player, especially on a very stupid long-term contract that the Padres should have never signed him to, but Peter Seidler was desperate for a championship, knowing that his time on this earth was limited, and he did everything in his power to make it happen. And it wasn't for a lack of effort. It just upsets me more than anything that the Padres haven't gotten there. Even in like 2022, I wish the Padres won it all after beating up on the Mets in the wild card, because at least we would have known that we lost to the best team in the National League that year. But no, they still don't win it all, right? It's frustrating. I feel for Padres fans, with Seidler especially. I really do. But guys, thank you so much for the donations. I really appreciate that. Or do I think Alvarez will find his power? Yeah, I absolutely do. I think as long as he's healthy with that thumb and everything, Alvy's going to have a huge, huge year for this Mets team in a very deep lineup, which I'm damn excited to break down with each and every one of you. But guys, that is about going to do it for our live show. I want to thank you all so much for watching live on a replay. And I apologize for not getting into as many comments as I otherwise would have liked to typically do. A little bit shorter on the live show today, but we will be back live tomorrow, if not the following day. Again, be on the lookout over the next couple days for our next live show, folks. If not over the weekend, then certainly next week. But news has been coming out every single day, to the point that I've had to come out at bare minimum a video and a live show for you, or 2 forms of videos a day, because of all the new updates happening every single day in Metsland. So as more news comes out, we'll break it down for each and every one of you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your continued thoughts on Michael Cain, Dylan Cease, Michael Canha reunion, potentially adding the bullpen still, among other things. Until then, folks, have a tremendous rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this. And this is your guy, Wardy,